Hey there, it's Monkey. I want to talk to you about some of the important things you want to take care of back at your base after you've beaten Motor, that's the mountain boss, and before you head into the plains. So obviously the first thing is you're going to turn in Motor's head back at the boss stones. I would say keep Bone Mass's power, that's the damage reduction power. You don't need Motor's power right now, that's the wind at your back bonus for while you're sailing. You don't need that right now. Once you've turned in the head, you want to jump back to your base. The first thing you're going to want to do is take a couple of those dragon tears that you got from killing Motor and craft this artisan table. You'll see it behind me here. The artisan table unlocks a couple other crafting structures that you can make. The one we're going to focus on right now is the blast furnace. You'll want to get that built and stuffed full of coal because that's what's going to smelt the black metal scraps that you pick up off of fuelings and turn them into black metal bars. The other use you have for the dragon tears, if you're playing with epic loot, is you can convert them into enchanting materials. With the artisan table and the blast furnace out of the way, what you're going to want to then do is double check that your base is well defended. You know that you've got your straight moat walls, and you've got perhaps a layer of stone walls on top of the moat that you've built. And the reason why is simple. For the mountains, we had to worry about wolves running up into our base and blobs jumping into our base. That's why we put this little added layer of walls up and whatnot. For the plains, it's just as dangerous. There are fuelings and berserkers and shaman that can spawn as part of the horde event now that Motor is dead. Now, should that event pop during the rest of your base prep, you're going to want to focus on taking down as many of those fuelings as possible to get as much black metal scrap as possible. Whereas with every other biome, you are digging ore out of the ground and you have to bring it back by boat to smelt it, this is one opportunity in the game where an event will bring your next tier's crafting material to your base without you having to do a lot of running around. For myself, I already had that event spawn while I was doing the first iteration of this playthrough, and from that I managed to get 16 black metal bars. So that was 16 pieces of scrap. I killed 16 or so fuelings because almost every single fueling I killed dropped some black metal. So make sure your base is prepared defenses wise. You should have already done that from the mountain preparation video that I had posted earlier. If your base defenses are set up such that you can prevent wolves from getting into your base, then you should be fine in terms of preventing all the different types of fuelings from walking up into your base. You just don't want them in there. You want to focus on being able to beat them out in the field, as it were. And really having them attack your base is, if your defenses are set up properly, is great, because if you need a rest, you just hop back into your base really quickly. Okay, so that's the main important thing to deal with after you've beaten Motor and before you're heading into the plains. The other things obviously are related to gear and optional items, potions and whatnot. If you beat Motor, then the armor you're wearing should be sufficient when it comes to going into the plains to begin with. For weapons, you're going to have a ranged weapon, of course, in the form of a bow. It's important to have probably a decent ranged attack because of the types of creatures you're going to be running into here, which means you're going to have a decent pierce attack on hand. But even then, I would still go for some sort of a piercing melee weapon if you can get it, and also a blunt melee weapon, because if there's a creature that's resistant to piercing in the plains, that same creature is vulnerable to blunt. Fire is okay. There's actually the same creatures that tend to be resistant to some of the physical weapons are actually vulnerable to fire. But really at this point, obsidian arrows that you should have from the mountains and eventually the needle arrows, they're just going to outpace the fire damage that even a vulnerable creature can yield. Frost is okay if you can get it on a weapon. Frostner, however, is not the best weapon. I mean, it gives you some frost damage, but almost every creature in the plains is immune to spirit damage, so you lose that damage component from the weapon. For epic loot, it's going to be the usual suspects. You know, one item with thorns, at least one item with thorns, and then hit points, stamina, and featherfall if you can get it on armor. Because we're still jumping around, you still want to prevent falling damage. And I would say thorns is important to get just that minimum of one piece, mainly because of death skeetos. Death skeetos will come in and hit you for a big chunk of damage, but if you have any thorns at all, the reflected damage that they take is enough to kill them in one shot. So even if you are not good at parrying and countering for death skeetos, if you just have thorns on one piece of armor or on your shield and you just full-on block them, the reflected damage from thorns will just take them out. It makes it much more bearable for those guys. For epic loot weapons, having recalling on a spear is great. Having throwable and recalling on a two-handed blunt weapon, still great. Those are the usual go-to recommendations anyway. For consumables, you're going to want to have a poison resistance mead, and that's mainly because of the tar pits you'll find. There are growths that come out of the tar pits, and they will hit you with a nasty poison and slow dot. So just having a couple on hand in case you accidentally or intentionally go after a tar pit is really important. Also, you're going to want a healing mead, just because there's lots of stuff to fight in there, and a lot of these things that you fight tend to hit pretty hard. In terms of food, you're going to want some of your best hit point food possible. So wolf skewer and sausages, those are two good hit point foods to roll with. And then any one of the 3 stamina foods you can make right now that are the best, that would be like ice cream, turnip stew, or onion soup, if you particularly have planted and grown enough onions that you can make that work for you. Any one of those 3 stamina foods. I'm going to link down below too to the food wiki. That'll give you a big list of all the food you can, search through. If you don't, for some reason, have the foods I'm recommending, you can find a lot of those things there. Lastly, of course, you're going to want to bring the typical mats for a portal. You're going to want to bring a pick, and you're going to want to bring a hoe. And I'll get really more into, using those things in our actual Plains guide itself. But this is covering all of the things that you want to make sure that you bring with you before you go to the Plains. Now, you should have already come across some Plains in your journeys as you've been either trying to find the swamp boss or the mountain boss, any one of those. The way I adventure, and I talked about this in a previous video, is I will sail down the coast putting portals on various islands as I'm scouting things out, looking for caves and whatnot in this instance. And that should already give you some locations that you can start exploring the Plains from. So, for example, my first round of exploration is probably going to be through this portal that I already have set up, because I already know there's a fueling camp right nearby. It's where we can get the totems that summon Yagluth. It's also maybe where we can find Vegvasir that will point us into Yagluth's direction. Also, particularly if you're playing with epic loot, it's a good way to, having portals on these various islands is a good way to go and see, I've got a new bounty, I'm going to go clean that bounty up just to get more gold and bounty tokens. I think that covers everything you need to do to prepare for going into the Plains. If you think I've missed something, or if you have a question, or if there's any other thoughts that you have on what should be done to prepare for going into the Plains, let me know down in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Please help me out by tapping that like button down below. Touch the monkey over there in the corner and subscribe if you haven't yet. Maybe catch up on my Valheim with Epic Loot playthrough, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.